Hello, and welcome to my Shadow Priest raiding guide. I'm Mason. I'm a pretty decent Shadow Priest. I'll show my logs here, pulling some 300 up to 465 DPS. Considerable amount. It could improve though. That's just, proof of concept. Shadow Priests can bring damage to the raid. So I'll start us off with our talents here. Spirit Tap or Blackout. Both pretty irrelevant in a raiding environment. Probably just go Spirit Tap though, it doesn't really matter. Like, you can stun ads, but it's 3 seconds, it's not going to be much, versus that mana regen. Doing dungeons will be a lot quicker. The second thing we want to get is Shadow Focus. Now this is a big DPS increase. Shadow Priests are the only ones who can get a 10% chance to hit for spells, versus like mages, warlocks, druids and shamans. This is quite big, as this is a big DPS increase, basically 10%. Warlocks get none, they're missing 17% of their spells. Mages only get like 6. So this gives us a very strong advantage in the pre-best in slot, like pre-raid best in slot gear kind of range, where everyone's missing a lot of hit. Maybe you don't have like all your pre-best, so you get quite a disadvantage, but this is a massive boost. Second thing we want to do is Shadow Affinity. Now this threat reduction here is essentially 25% more damage you can deal. Now, especially early on in the game, maybe you're in a, I don't want to say bad guild, but not the best guild in the world. Maybe your tank can't hold much threat. This is basically, you can do 25% more damage than anyone else. I don't think warlocks have anything like this, unless they get the improved imp, but they only have 20%, and no one's picking that right now. Mages get a little bit as well, but this isn't our only source, so it's still a massive thing. Like, your tank's pulling in 100 threat per second, you can go to 130, and now you get what, 160? Somewhere around 165 threat-ish? Something around that ballpark. While everyone else who doesn't have threat reduction can only deal like melee 110. So your rogues, warriors, they're damage capped, but you can far surpass that cap. Second thing you want to get is the improved fourth thing, sorry. You want to get 4 points in this. This will get the cooldown down to 6 seconds. Over here on my guy, I've only got 2 points in it, so it's 7. But the idea of this is to chain your mind flays. So 2 mind flays, then a mind blast, and then 2 mind flays, mind blast. Chain that back to back for the maximum DPS output. An important side note on this ability though is it's a high amount of threat, as you can see over on the right hand side. Now this basically means it does double the threat of a normal ability. So assuming I didn't have any spell power right now, and your spell crit is whatever, but you get spells are 50% more damage if they crit. So what's that? 900 top end, more or less. So you want to be looking out for about 2000 threat below your main tank to make sure you don't steal aggro. But of course we have the threat reduction talent over here. Now, hold off on Mind Flay for a second. Range, that's essential. Shadow Weaving, everyone knows what this is. This is the big reason everyone brings a Shadow Priest into a raid. It's 15% more damage to your warlocks and to you. Massive increase. Vampiric Embrace, you have to have it. Darkness, 10% more damage. Shadow Form, 15% more damage. Massive. Unbreakable Will, doesn't matter, you could go wand if you really want to, but you shouldn't really be wanding. Like, you probably will, but you shouldn't be. And if you are, it's going to be a negligible damage increase. Much better to avoid a stun or something and, get a shield off maybe if you need to. Whatever. Open world, definitely stun resist. And over here we have a 20% threat reduction. So this totals us to 45% threat reduction. And this is what really makes Shadow Priest great in the early game stages of Classic WoW. This essentially means we can do more damage than anyone else by threat. So I mean, hunters can feign death and just drop all threat. We can't do that, or rogues can vanish even. But what we can do is just keep a naturally lower threat. Obviously, Mind Blast will interfere with that, but it's, you know, if you're threat capped, you probably will just Mind Flay. Doesn't really matter. Now this is where the build quite opens up. Hopefully your raid lets you Mind Flay. Otherwise you're kind of fucked, so we'll grab a point in that. And this is basically the essentials. Of course, sometimes someone might just say you can't Mind Flay, but at that stage, maybe don't go Shadow Priest, but for the 15% more damage, it's still worth it from Shadow Weaving. Now, Shadow Word Pain, create ability. It's another debuff slot, however. So if you're able to use it, put 2 points in here. The next one is Vampiric Embrace. Now this is an incredibly underrated debuff slot to take up, because it's base 20% healing. In an ideal scenario, you've got 4 Warlocks in your group. Everyone has to have Warlocks and Molten Core, and you're healing them for 20% each of your damage. So that's 100% potential of your healing, but you probably won't need it. They will, because they'll be life tapping. And hopefully they do it at a moderate pace, so you can just constantly be regenerating them HP. Saves a lot of mana on the healers. It's also something to keep in mind. And if you do have Vampiric Embrace from the boss, you'll want to get this as well. That's 30%, so that's 120% of your damage will go straight to healing. 150 total, but assuming you've got Warlocks, 120. Which makes you very, very mana efficient in an overall sense. However, it will give you a lot more threat, which is why it's essential you take this and this. This will lower your damage potential, because half of all healing, half of healing is threat basically. So if you heal 100 HP, you get 50 threat. With the 20% reduction over here though, it's 40 threat? It's still a lot, but it's great. Now we've got 4 points left. Ask 1 in a focus and 3 in meditation. This would be your ideal build. If you have free reign on your debuffs, no one's going to be stopping you or anything. Get this mana regen here for meditation. That is just, it's quite a lot. You'll never need to wand. However, you probably will, because wanding isn't that mana efficient. I mean, not wanding. Mind Flay isn't, it's not good DPS basically. After a 2-minute fight, you'll be Mind Flay rank 1 just to keep Shadow Vulnerability up. It's that's what you have to do, but rank 1 Mind Flay, it's mana efficient, but it's not good DPS. You'll be better off just wanding and doing a Mind Flay every 15 seconds basically. However, if you can't get your Shadow Word Pain or Vampiric Embrace up on the boss, you can get this, which is just a great thing to have. You can drop 2 points into here. Typically, if I do this, I like to take 1 out of meditation and put it into shield. Shield's pretty great in a fight like Rag, where you will just occasionally get blasted into the lava. In that kind of scenario, you're not going to be doing anything else. You might as well just shield yourself. Save your healer some mana. And, you're moving so you can't cast anything. But, who cares? Now, it's obviously not an ideal DPS scenario. But, yeah, and this Fortitude, it's good. It makes it 70 instead of 54, I believe. But you'll have other healers in your raid with improved fort, and so they'll be doing it. But if you just want to save time, make healers' lives a bit easier for rebuffing or after a wipe, you can just grab this. Definitely not an essential, but it's just nice for the team. Some things to consider would be something like improved fade. Well, not consider, but you might be misguided into thinking fade's good. What's the thing on that? 2 points, yeah. So 6-second decrease on fade might seem good. However, where's fade? Fade's a temporary thing. I believe the exact threat reduction is about 1,000. And what this really means is for 10 seconds, you have 1,000 less threat. So maybe like right at the end of a boss, you can pop fade and get an extra 1,000 damage-ish out there where you would normally have stolen threat. But typically, if it's, the last 5%, like, you're not going to wipe or anything. The boss is dead. So it's nothing to worry about. Some useful tricks to keep in mind. Mind Flay. I assume everyone knows about the 5-second rule. So basically 5 seconds after you last cast a spell, you will regenerate mana. However, with Mind Flay, what that actually means is from when you first cast it, even though it's a channel. So if you Mind Blasted, you cast it for 1.5 seconds, and then you get it. So from when you click the button, you'll get the 5-second rule to kick in 6.5 seconds later. But for Mind Flay, it's only 5 seconds later when you push it. And 3 of those seconds you'll be dealing damage. So we'll just do a rank 1 here, and that straight away. Because we're just that good. Okay, it's actually too strong to show this. But essentially, when you just want to keep up shadow vulnerability, Mind Flay's your go-to. Now back to the proof of concept. I'll just pull up a log. Where are we? This one, I think it is. So, not the highest, but I'm pretty up there. 345's alright. And we look at it from a healing perspective. Got some good healers here. 276 healing. It's solid. But if we think about it in terms of Vampiric Embrace, 20% right now, but 30% with the talents. That's 150% of my damage is healing. What are we at? 345. What's that? Little over 450 is healing. So if you've got your warlocks who are constantly life tapping, not constantly, but relatively often life tapping, save your healers a lot of mana, and you're putting out 400 heals per second, assuming perfect scenario, and this then factors into the point of Shadow Priest being very mana inefficient. With this 350 mana for up to 600 damage, excluding like spell power and shit, and our spell power ratios are dog shit. But this is it's average. This basically double mana, like double the damage for the mana cost. It's not the greatest, especially when the other classes have something like the crit increasing things. So we look at a warlock here. They get ruin, 100% more damage. Now I believe that's from the 50. So it's not like they do a 250% crit. It's a 200% damage crit. Mages have the same thing, I believe it is. Where are they? What is it, eye shards? Yeah. I believe it is just to 200%, which is essentially why all these other spellcaster classes outscale us in damage. And basically from the point they step into Molten Core, they improve exponentially while Shadow Priests don't. But the thing to keep in mind is that we have a very efficient heal. So, 40 mana, put that up, that costs you nothing. Like, it's the debuff slot, and the debuff slot is definitely going to be the biggest thing to, the biggest hurdle to get past. Because you have to convince someone to say, hey, don't put corruption on the boss. I'll pull up my raids debuff sheets. I'm sure this is okay. We have 3 corruptions up here. I suppose we're missing Annihilator. Oh, there's another one as well, I think. But so that's 2 less corruptions. Corruption's a dog shit fucking debuff. Like, the reason Shadowwood Pain's so strong is because we get this extra 6 seconds from this talent. Whereas Warlocks don't get that. The only thing they get to help that is Nightfall, which, it's not good. Nightfall's not going to be better than Demonic Sacrifice with Succubus. Ever. Unless you're multi-dotting, sorry. So, yeah, sure, like a multi, something fight like, what's the guy? Major Domo. Golemag, if you're hitting the ads. Gar, if you're AoE, AoE multi-dotting. That's a fight where corruptions... But even then, that's on the ads and not the main boss. So it shouldn't really be anything to consider. But hopefully, this is showing everyone that Shadow Priests bring a lot to the table. Obviously, we've got Dispel Magic. Very good on Shazra, dispelling his thing. Abolish Disease, probably not going to use that in a raid often, but I'm sure there's an encounter. And Power Word Shield, obviously. Wouldn't put this on a tank or anything, but you could save someone's life with this. Healers don't want to be casting shield. They just want to be healing. Maybe they're dropping a flash heal or something. Not going to be quick enough. Maybe you're moving, like you've been hit in the fire by Rag. Power Word Shield, save a life. Obviously, you've got stuff like Resurrection to speed up times if you're dying. And yeah, it deserves a raid spot, guys. Shadow Priests really deserve a raid spot. I know the big drawbacks are debuffs and mana issues, but Corruption doesn't deserve a debuff, guys. Let's be real. It's a dog shit spell. And we have runes. You pop this. What's that? Let's say that's 1200 average. And what's major mana? 1800 mana on average, let's say. Yeah. What's that? 3100 mana every 2 minutes. That's, you're never going to have enough to always be going hard on the boss. Past 2 minutes, you slow down a lot. But if you do have the Vampiric Embrace and everything, and get this as well, you will make up for that mana efficiency in healing, essentially. Because it costs you 40 mana from Vampiric Embrace to do all your damage and healing to your party. And, obviously, you're going to get a lot of overhealing. But, as long as Warlocks aren't being healed when they shouldn't be, you'll be fine. They pop a life tap. Maybe you do a Mind Blast. Boom. All the Warlocks have got all their HP back. And they've got their mana. They're never going to run out of mana. And you're going to give them very efficient heals through damage. So it's 2-for-1 combo. And especially on the later fights in Classic. Because Rag, these kill times. 210's the longest. 212, sorry. Is that totally right? Yeah. Everything dies very, very quickly. There are none of these fights you're going to run except for Rag and Majordomo. Like Soft Ruin's also a weird one because you do a lot of shadow word painting, and that's very minor intensive. 470, you get what? 10 of those a fight. That's one way to think about it. Which is not great. But then again, you've got 3,100 mana every 2 minutes. You pop those very early in a fight in MC, and you're not going to have any issues. Here's just the general thing of it. So we'll look at this, just the average kind of players. Obviously the top end, very few people are going to be there. And I mean, if someone was at the top end, you'd bring them anyway, right? Like, you would never say no to the top Shadow Priest, or the top fucking Feral Druid, because like they're going to be better than your average player no matter what. But in terms of like the median kind of mean DPS, upper quartiles and shit, all very similar to mages and warlocks. Like, and that it's a very slight DPS loss to put a Shadow Priest in your raid if you know that all of your warlocks are going to do 15% more damage. I don't want to flex on my warlocks, but he'd be doing what, 45, 50 less DPS, what, 40 DPS less. Not having there, but yeah, I mean, essentially it's 90 DPS for me. Like, you add so much DPS to the raid for the cost of 1 debuff slot, or 3 ideally, and even actually 4 ideally. And like, who cares about corruption? Corruption's just damage, and corruption's never going to be more damage than Shadow Word Pain. They both have a 100% spell coefficient, which is, you get 10 points of spell power, 14 points, whatever, you get 14 points of damage. But because of the extra 6 seconds, that's 2 extra ticks, which is, it's like a 0.6 thing. So like for 14 spell damage, you'll get, 17 damage instead or whatever. It just makes it by far the best DPS dot in the game. Very underrated. I think that's everything, really. Thanks for listening to my rambly-ish Shadow Priest and Raids guide. Hopefully you guys can see the validity of it. Cheers.